Good evening, good vach, Shavua Tov. Great to be learning with you on a Saturday night. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house on a Saturday night? Melissa in Great Neck, Joe in the Inland Empire, Gail in Kansas City, Bella in Florida, Sharon in New Jersey, and Spencer in Connecticut, Elle in Southern California, Marie in Freeport, New York. Welcome, everybody. Tonight's episode of AT Daily, sponsored by Sheila DeLiz for the healing of Yarden Bibas. Amen. May he be comforted and healed and just, incomprehensible loss. His wife Shira, the boys, the little boys, those sweet little boys. May he be comforted. May he be healed. We say amen. And Sheila, thank you so much for such a sensitive and beautiful dedication. And thank you for enabling us to share more Torah with more people around the world. And in the merit of that, may you be showered, you and all your loved ones, be showered in blessings. And we say amen. Wonderfully colorful daf tonight. And a wonderful little coincidence, as we shall see. Coincidence, accident. There are no accidents. It's a shkaka pratis. It's always some kind of divine providence. Sometimes, stands out more than others. Our daf is page 70. So that's Daf Ayin, page 70, here in Tractate Sanhedrin, 24th volume of the Talmud. Continuing our journey through chapter 8. Tonight, Mishnah number 2. With God's help, we'll open it and complete it. Here's the Mishnah, continuing the discussion of the stubborn and rebellious son, the Ben Sorer Umore, which the Torah describes this stubborn and rebellious son, who at a young age, his ways are already so wicked that he's destined for some kind of terrible fate. He'll hurt others. He'll, just do nothing but wickedness and evil in the world. And the Torah says his parents should bring him to the judges, and then he should be examined. And if he is indeed this wicked, he should be executed. Not because he's already committed a death penalty offense, but because he will in the future. And the way the sages interpret this law, this has never been, I will just go out on a limb. We usually say, we're all sure that it's never happened. I am sure it's never happened. Question is, why does the Torah include such a law? But the sages made sure that it could never happen. The requirements for the death penalty to actually kick in are so intense, so weighty. They're so they're impossible to satisfy the requirements, and we're going to start to see that tonight. Okay, Mishnah number 2. From when? Okay, yesterday we talked about the age of the Ben Sora Umore. So the only age at which this would qualify is when he's more than a minor and less than an adult. It seems like maybe there's only a 3-month period in his life, just age-wise, when that would apply. Now it's more the requirements of what is his behavior. So from when is a stubborn and rebellious son liable? From when he eats a tartamar of meat and drinks a half log of Italian wine. Italian, not because it's from Italy. Italian wine is more a description of a type of very strong wine. Rabbi Yosef says from when he eats a mane of meat and drinks a log of wine. So this is like a child, right? It's basically a child, and he's eating a large amount of meat and drinking a large amount of wine. The Mishnah now, I don't think you ever saw a child eat so much meat and drink so much wine. The Mishnah now lists a series of conditions concerning his eating and drinking. If he ate these items with a group assembled for the performance of a mitzvah, or he ate them at a meal celebrating the intercalation of a month, or he ate the items when they had second tithe status in Jerusalem, well, then he does not become the stubborn and rebellious son, because each of these circumstances involves some aspect of a mitzvah. And this is based on the fact that the Torah defines the stubborn and rebellious son as someone who won't listen to his parents. So he doesn't heed your voice. So if in any way his eating that meat and drinking that wine is somehow tied to something that is commanded, right? Like it's a second tithe being eaten in Jerusalem, or it was assembled in some kind of a way for a mitzvah. For instance, a week from yesterday, next Friday, we're going to have a Purim Suda. Having a meal on Purim, which does include meat and wine, that is performance of a mitzvah. We're fulfilling an obligation when we do that. So if he ate all that meat and drank that wine, but it happened to be a Purim Suda or a Shabbos meal or any kind of a mitzvah meal, then he would not be a stubborn and rebellious son, even if his ways in every other way were wicked. If he ate the meat of an unslaughtered animal, that's a nevela. In other words, it was not slaughtered in a kosher manner. Or animals that had wounds that would have caused them to die within 12 months. That's a treifa, also rendering the meat not kosher. Or he ate repugnant creatures or creeping animals. Or he ate untithed produce from which tithes and terumas were not separated. Or first tithe from which its teruma was not separated. Or second tithe outside of Jerusalem, or consecrated food that was not redeemed. Each of these actions involves a transgression. And then he does not become a stubborn and rebellious son. So the Mishnah summarizes, if he ate an item that somehow involves performing a mitzvah, or an item that somehow involves committing a transgression, either way, this would disqualify him from being liable to the death penalty for being the stubborn and rebellious son. Or if he ate any food in the world, no matter how much of it, but he didn't eat meat, or if he drank any beverage in the world, no matter how much of it, no matter how much the alcohol content, but he didn't drink wine specifically, then he does not become the stubborn and rebellious son, unless he actually eats meat and actually drinks wine. As it is stated, the line Deuteronomy 21:20, from which this law is derived. This son of ours is stubborn and rebellious. He does not listen to our voice. He is a glutton, zolel, and the drunkard, vesove. That's Deuteronomy 21:20. So one is not called a glutton and a drunkard, according to this definition, unless he eats meat and drinks wine. And although there is no explicit proof to the matter that the reference in the Torah is specifically to meat and wine, nevertheless there is an allusion to this matter in another verse elsewhere in the Bible, as it is stated, be not among wine drinkers, besove, among gluttonous eaters, bezolele, of meat. That's Proverbs 23:20. Okay, that's the Mishnah. Now we get more into detail. Rabbi Zera says, concerning this tartamar of meat, right, this minimum quantity that he would have to eat of meat in order to be considered a glutton, according to this definition, says Rabbi Zera, I do not know what its measure is. What do you mean this tartamar of meat? How much is that? Rabbi Zera doesn't know. But since Rabbi Yosef, who's mentioned in the Mishnah, is found to have doubled the measure of the wine, as the unattributed opinion of our Mishnah speaks of a half lug of wine, whereas Rabbi Yosef says it has to be a whole lug of wine, a complete lug of wine. So he is presumably found to have doubled the measure of the meat as well. So this tartemar must be the equivalent of half a mane, since Rabbi Yosef says the stubborn and rebellious son won't be found to be that unless he eats a mane of meat. It's a lot of meat. Now, Rav Chanan Bar Molada says that Rav Huna says a stubborn and rebellious son is not liable unless he purchases inexpensive meat, bezol, and eats it. And he buys inexpensive wine and drinks it. As it is written, he is a glutton and a drunkard. He has to purchase it, not just find it in the cupboard of his family's house. This kid is 12 years old. And Rav Hanan Bar Molada says that Rav Huna says a stubborn and rebellious son is not liable unless he eats raw meat and drinks undiluted wine. The Gemara challenges this. Is that so? But doesn't Rabba and Rav Yosef, don't Rabba and Rav Yosef both say, if he ate raw meat or drank undiluted wine, he does not become a stubborn and rebellious son? So which is it? He has to eat raw meat or he cannot eat raw meat? He has to drink undiluted wine or he cannot drink undiluted wine? Ravina said the two conflicting statements can be reconciled. If he ate totally raw meat or drank totally undiluted wine, he is in fact exempt. This would not qualify him according to the definition of the stubborn and rebellious son. The undiluted wine for which he is liable is wine that is diluted but not diluted properly. And the raw meat for which he is liable is meat that is cooked but not cooked properly. What do we mean? Like the scorched meat that thieves are wont to eat due to the hasty manner in which they must prepare their food. They cook it a little, but they can't wait for it to be fully cooked. Thieves because they're on the run, and the stubborn and rebellious son because he's such a glutton that he can't wait for it to be fully cooked before he wants to eat it. Rabba and Rav Yosef both say if he ate heavily salted meat or he drank wine from his wine press, i.e. wine that has not finished fermenting, so it's not wine yet, therefore he does not become a stubborn and rebellious son. And on a related topic, we learned in a Mishnah elsewhere, Tainus 26b, on the eve of Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, when we commemorate, it's the saddest day in the Jewish calendar, the date on which both of the holy temples were destroyed, the first and second temple, and many other tragedies happened in Jewish history. And so we fast. That's a full 25-hour fast, like the fast of Yom Kippur. So on the day before Tisha B'Av, we already start to go into the customs of mourning, because we're observing a day of mourning on Tisha B'Av. So on Erev Tisha B'Av, a person may not eat 2 cooked dishes in one meal. And furthermore, he may neither eat meat nor drink wine. And a Tana taught in a Baraisa, but one may eat heavily salted meat, as this is not considered meat. And one may drink wine from his wine press before it has properly fermented, because it is not considered wine. It's somehow unfinished. Heavily salted meat is sort of in the process of being salted, and then later you'll wash off the salt, and then you would eat it. It's been preserved. So heavily salted meat means it's in a process, and it's not ready yet to be called meat. Obviously, we would call it meat just because it came from an animal, it's meat. But when we're talking about the definition of meat to become liable for eating that quantity and becoming the stubborn rebellious son, this would not qualify. Now the Gemara asks, with regard to salted meat on Erev Tisha B'Av, how long must this meat remain in salt before it is permitted? And Rabbi Chanina Bar Kahana says, as long as it is like a peace offering. Well, a peace offering could be eaten for 2 days and 1 night after it was sacrificed. This is when the temple was standing. After this time has passed, it is no longer the type of meat that one may not eat during that meal. Therefore, if it was salted for longer than this, it may be eaten on the eve of Tisha B'Av. Now the Gemara inquires further, and with regard to wine from his wine press, If it was salted longer than this, it may be eaten. It sounds to me like there's a word missing there. It should have been it may not be eaten. Let me keep going. The Gemara inquires further, and with regard to wine from his press before it was properly fermented, until when is wine considered in this category? As long as it is still fermenting. And it is taught in a baraisa, fermenting wine, right, in the process of becoming wine, is not subject to the prohibition of exposed liquids, as there is no concern that a snake will leave its venom in that wine. I have a glass of water right here. It's just been sitting here, for a few days actually. If I was very thirsty, I might be tempted to drink this. According to halacha, Jewish law, I should not drink it, because we don't know what fell into this wine while it was sitting here. That's the law of exposed liquids. But wine that is in the process of fermenting, we wouldn't be concerned about it, because a snake would not deposit its venom in wine that is in the process of fermenting. And how long is the initial fermenting period? 3 days from the time that the grapes were pressed. Now the Gemara clarifies these definitions of salty meat and wine from his winepress were stated with regard to the prohibitions applying on Erev Tisha B'Av. Here, concerning a stubborn and rebellious son, what is considered salty meat and wine from his press? And the Gemara answers, there, with regard to Erev Tisha B'Av, the prohibition is due to joy. As long as the meat is like a peace offering, there is still joy. We don't want to have joy on Erev Tisha B'Av because we're going into deep mourning. But here, with regard to a stubborn and rebellious son, it is due to the son becoming drawn to it, right? He's a glutton. He just wants to eat it so much he can't, stop himself. He's totally enslaved to his cravings. And if the taste of the meat is flawed, only slightly, he will not be drawn to it. And with regard to wine, there is no concern that he will be drawn to it until it is 40 days old. Now, to me, there's not real logic there, right? If this guy is so drawn to meat that he can't stop himself from eating it, even if it's only slightly cooked, so he's not going to want to eat it if it's flawed in some way, like it's oversalted or undersalted. But I think, again, what's really going on is that the sages are making the legal definition impossible to meet, so that there never will be an execution of a ben sorer umoret. Now that we have brought up wine and indulging in wine, and somebody who's addicted to his cravings for wine in the context of the stubborn and rebellious son, we're going to take a digression for a while and talk about wine. And the idea that in moderation, it's very beneficial. We make Kiddush on Friday nights and on Saturday lunch, right? We sanctify the day with wine. There were wine libations in the Holy Temple. Wine has a very holy and important purpose in Judaism. But the sages fully acknowledge that one can abuse wine and go down a very dark and sordid path by becoming a drunkard, one who is enslaved to that addiction. And so now we're going to learn, a bunch of lessons about wine. What's kind of amazing, right? So this is the Gemara. Now we're doing a commentary that was put together by our sages of blessed memory in the period between the year 200 and the year 500, more or less of the Common Era. And they're commenting on Mishnayos, plural, of Mishna, right? The Mishna, broadly speaking, right? The collection of Mishnayos, that was redacted by Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi in the year 200, more or less, of the Common Era. And at that time, right, before that, it was just oral. Then he put it down. Okay, so there was a list of the Mishnahs. But at that time, there was no such thing as a book with pages, right? Everything was in scroll form. It would only be later in history where we'd have the form of a book called a codex, with a cover on top, a cover on the bottom, and pages. And then for a long time, those were all handwritten. So there was no standard pagination of books that were, handwritten. They had to be copied by hand. Eventually, we had the printing press. Okay, so when was the printing press? The printing press, somebody will sure help me out, but I believe 16th century was the beginning of the printing press. And then eventually, there was an edition of the Talmud that was printed. And it was really only at that time that you could have pagination, right? And then eventually a standard pagination. I'm not sure if that was, if the first, what became the standard pagination of the Talmud was the printing of the Talmud in Vilna, called the Vilna Shas, or if it was the Sonsino, which I think was earlier, the Bromberg, something like that. I should know, but I don't know offhand. But at any rate, relatively recently in history, just the last 400 or 500 years. So it's interesting that this discussion of wine fell out on page 70 of Tractate Sanhedrin, right? Daf Ayin. Ayin is the Hebrew letter in the alphabet that represents 70, the number 70. Every letter in the Hebrew alphabet has a numerical value. How do we say wine in Hebrew? Yayin, Yud, Yud, Nun. Yud has the value 10, so Yud and Yud is 10 and 10 is 20. Nun has the value 50. 10 and 10 and 50 is 70. And it's well known that the numerical value of wine is yayin, because there's another teaching that comes up very often, and we see it elsewhere in the Talmud actually, that the word sod, samech vav dalet, so samech is 60, vav is 6, and dalet is 4, also adds up to 70, and the word sod means secret. And so we've seen elsewhere in the Talmud that when wine goes in, secrets come out. And it very much, this saying has a dual meaning. On the one hand, somebody who is able to use wine for inspiration, right? Somebody who's drinking it in moderation, not to get drunk, but just to have kind of spiritual Torah inspiration, drinks some wine, and then he's going to be able to put things together that he might not have put together otherwise. So wine goes in, secrets come out. And some people drink too much, and then their loose lips start sinking ships, right? They get a loose tongue, they say things they shouldn't have said. Wine goes in, secrets come out. Both meanings, right? And so based on tying yayin and sod, numerical value 70, or that's called gematria, where we look at the numerical value of different Hebrew words, and if they have the same value, there's a connection between them. And so isn't it interesting that this discussion of wine fell out on page 70 of Tractate Sanhedrin? I was actually talking to a rabbi today who teaches Daf Yomi at a quite high level, very, very learned and wise rabbi. And I noticed this, and I said to him, did you notice, because we're a few days behind, that when you taught, this daf about wine, that it fell out on Daf Ayin? And he's like, no, I didn't notice that. Thank you, Sal. That's a good one. So, let's go. The Gemara's discussion turns to wine in general. Rav Chanan says wine was created in the world only to comfort mourners in their distress and to reward the wicked in this world so that they will have no reward in the world to come. As it is stated, Proverbs 31:6, give strong drink to him that is ready to perish, and wine to the bitter of soul. Him that is ready to perish, this is referring to the wicked, who will perish from this world. The wicked, right, they'll get all their reward, any little good that they did, they get it in this world. In the next world, there's nothing waiting for them. And why are they wicked? Is it because they're wicked, they end up being, abusing wine? Or is that they abuse wine and ended up becoming wicked? Hard to say, but the wicked and wine often go together. But also, there's this ability of wine to comfort a mourner. Again, this would be one of the uses in moderation. Rabbi Yitzchak says, what is the meaning of that which is written? Look not upon wine when it is red. Proverbs 23:31. Look not upon wine that reddens the face of the wicked in this world when they drink it, and whitens their faces, meaning it embarrasses them in the world to come when they're called to account for their deeds in this world. And they're like, oh yeah, I was drunk and I did this, and I was drunk and I did that, and I was drunk and I did that. They'll be embarrassed. Rav has said that this is how the verse should be understood. Look not upon wine that reddens, yitadam, which means look not upon wine, don't get involved with wine, as it leads to dam, right? Dam can mean red, it also means blood. So don't get involved with wine because it leads to bloodshed, indicating that one who drinks wine will end up committing an act of killing or will be killed because of it. Rav Kahana raises a contradiction. The verse states, therefore they shall come and sing in the height of Zion, and shall flow to the bounty of the Lord for wheat and for wine and for oil and for the young of the flock and of the herd. Jeremiah 31:11. So the word for wine is written tirash without the letter vav. That's another word for wine. But we read it as tirosh with the letter vav. And the matter can be explained as follows. If one merits and drinks a moderate amount, he becomes a leader, rosh. Whereas if he does not merit and he drinks excessively, he becomes poor. Rash. Rava raises a similar contradiction. It is written, and wine that gladdens the heart of man, from Psalm 104, verse 15. The word for gladdens could be read as yeshamach, meaning that the wine makes one crazy. But we read it as yesamach, which gladdens the heart. So the matter can be explained as follows. If one merits and drinks a moderate amount of wine, it gladdens him, mesamecho. Whereas if he does not merit and he drinks excessively, it makes him crazy, meshamemehu. And that is what Rava meant when he said, wine and spices have made me wise. That is to say, the controlled drinking of wine is beneficial to the drinker. Evidently, spice also included in that. Rav Amram, the son of Rabbi Shimon bar Abba, says that Rabbi Hanina says, what is the meaning of that which is written, quote, who cries? Woe! Who cries? Alas! Who has quarrels? Who has complaints? Who has causeless injuries? Who has redness of eyes? They who tarry long at wine. They who go to seek mixed wine. Proverbs 23, verses 29 and 30. When Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, he said that they say in the West, meaning in Eretz Yisrael, that one who interprets this verse from the beginning to the end interprets it in a way that has meaning and significance, and also one who interprets it from the end to the beginning interprets it in a meaningful manner. We had a similar teaching yesterday. It is possible to interpret these verses from the beginning to end and say, woe and alas to one who drinks wine. And it is also possible to interpret them from the end to the beginning. Who drinks wine? He who has quarrels, complaints, and injuries. A visitor from the Galilee expounded, the conversive vav, now we're talking about a little bit of grammar, is stated 13 times in the passage concerning wine. As it is stated, and Noah began, vayachel, to be a farmer, and he planted, vayita, a vineyard, and he drank, right? Vav, at the beginning of a word, makes it and, links it to what comes before. And he was uncovered, Vayitgal, within his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw Vayar, the nakedness of his father, and told Vayeged, his two brothers outside. And Shem and Japheth took Vayikach, the garment, and laid it, Vayasimu, upon both their shoulders, and went, Vayalekhu, backward, and covered, Vayachasu, the nakedness of their father, and their faces were backward, and they did not see their father's nakedness. And Noah awoke, Vayiketz, from his wine, and he knew, Vayeda, what his younger son had done to him. This is that story after Noah and his family came off the ark, after the flood had ended. And there was this bizarre incident when Noah, who planted a vineyard and created wine for the first time on earth, and I guess was the first person to ever get drunk from it, and then an incident happened. And it's unclear exactly what happened. But his son, Ham, the youngest son, did something with his father. Minimally, looked at his father when he was naked. But the sages are going to say, well, then why did Noah curse his son? Just because his son saw him when he was naked? I mean, it's a very heavy curse. That's a very strong reaction for, okay, his son shouldn't have looked at him when he was naked. But it sounds like something more happened. So the sages will say, yes, something much more happened. But it's in this incident. Now, all 13 instances of this vav here are followed by the letter yud. So together they form the word vai, right? So vav yud spells vai. And what does that mean? Woe. And allude to the suffering and misfortune caused by uncontrolled drinking, right? Noah invented wine. Noah got drunk from it, and something terrible happened between him and his son, and he ended up cursing his son because of it. Now, having cited the passage discussing Noah, the Gemara enters into a discussion about what was actually done to him by his younger son, Ham. So Rav and Shmuel disagreed. One says that Ham castrated Noah, and the other one says that Ham sodomized his father. So the Gemara explains, the one who says that Ham castrated Noah adduces the following proof. Since he injured Noah with respect to the possibility of conceiving a fourth son, which Noah wanted but could no longer have, therefore Noah cursed him by means of Ham's fourth son. Who was Ham's fourth son? Well, his sons were Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan, right? See Genesis 10:6. And of all of these, it was Canaan, right? The forebear of the Canaanites, whom Noah cursed. See Genesis chapter 9, verses 25 through 28. And the one who says that Ham sodomized his father, Noah, learned this from a verbal analogy between the words "and he saw" and the words "and he saw" used elsewhere. Here it is written, and Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father. And there it is written, in the incident of Shechem, who raped Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, it said, and Shechem, the son of Hamor, the Hivite, prince of the country, saw her. And he took her, and he lay with her, and afflicted her. Right? He raped her. And this indicates that the term saw alludes to sexual intercourse, and in this context, prohibited sexual intercourse. So the Gemara asks, granted, according to the one who says that Ham castrated Noah, it is due to this reason that Noah cursed Ham by means of Ham's fourth son. But according to the one who says that Ham sodomized him, what is different about his fourth son? Why did Noah curse Ham's fourth son? He should have cursed Ham directly. So the Gemara answers that this sage holds that both this offense and that offense were committed, meaning all agree that Ham castrated Noah, but some say that Ham also sodomized him. The Gemara continues to analyze the passage relating to Noah. The verse states, quote, and Noah began to be a farmer, and he planted a vineyard. So in explanation of this matter, Rav Chisda says that Rav Ukva says, and some say that Mar Ukva says, that Rabbi Zakkai says, the Holy One, blessed be he, said to Noah, Noah, shouldn't you have learned from Adam, the first man, whose banishment from the Garden of Eden was caused only by wine? Was Adam banished from the Garden of Eden because of wine? Why was Adam banished from the Garden of Eden? He was told, there's only one rule, don't eat fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And the serpent, instigated and convinced Eve to try the fruit, and she didn't die. So then she said to Adam, hey, this fruit is good. And we didn't die when we ate it. Not the snake and not me. I don't know if the snake ate it, but he's the one who told her to eat it. And so then Adam tried it. And then they knew that they were naked. And then God comes along and says, you disobeyed me, and now you're out. Right? And by the sweat of your brow, you shall earn your bread. And to the man and to the woman, you shall have pain in childbirth and all kinds of other stuff. And you're banished from the Garden of Eden. What does that have to do with wine? The Gemara notes, this is in accordance with the opinion of the one who says that the tree from which Adam, the first man, ate was a grapevine. As it is taught in a Baraisa, Rabbi Meir says, the tree from which Adam, the first man, ate was a grapevine. As even today, nothing except wine brings wailing and trouble upon a person. Most sins are caused by drunkenness. This is the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Now we're on page 70b. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. He says the tree of knowledge was the wheat plant. Wheat. And this is proven by the fact that even today, an infant does not know how to call out to his father or mother until he tastes the taste of grain. And for this reason, wheat is called the tree of knowledge. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Nehemiah says, the tree of knowledge was a fig tree because it was with the matter with which they sinned that they were rehabilitated. As it is stated, and they sewed together fig leaves and made for themselves loincloths. As for all the European art that portrays the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil as an apple, that's not a Jewish idea. That has nothing to do with traditional sources. It certainly doesn't say any such thing in the Bible. And our sages who've been examining this question for a long time and had a direct link, right, all the way back, teacher to student, to Moshe Rabbeinu, to Moses, our teacher, who took dictation directly from God when he wrote down the Torah. In all of that tradition, no apple is ever mentioned as the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But we're not sure what it is. Here's three opinions. One, grapes, meaning wine. You could see why, right, in this context of this discussion. The other, wheat. Very interesting. Third, fig. There are other opinions in other places, but none of them hold by the apple. Okay, that finishes that part of our discussion, but here's next about wine. The Gemara continues its discussion of wine, referring to the verse that states, the words of King Lemuel, the burden with which his mother corrected him. That's Proverbs 31:11. What are we talking about King Lemuel? Who is King Lemuel? We're actually talking about Solomon, Shlomo HaMelech. Rabbi Yochanan says in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, this teaches that when Solomon's mother, Bathsheba, saw Solomon engaged in excessive drinking, she bound him to a pillar and had him flogged. Solomon, in his youth, was getting involved in drinking, and his mother corrected him with tough love. Must have worked. Became one of the greatest kings in history. What happened? She bound him to a pillar and had him flogged. And she said to him, what, my son? And what, son of my womb? And what, son of my vows? Citing Proverbs 31:2. What did she mean? She meant, what, my son? Everyone knows that your father, David, King David, was a God-fearing man. And now, when they see you sinning, they will say that his mother caused him to sin, that I caused you to drink. You're taking after me, i.e. that you engage in these behaviors because you are my son. Don't bring disgrace on me, your mother, by becoming a drunkard. And second, she said, and what, son of my womb? That is to say, with regard to all of the women of your father's house, once they conceive, they no longer see the face of the king. But I pushed myself in and entered the king's chamber while I was pregnant, so that I might have a son who is strong and fair-skinned. What is she saying? There are times during a woman's pregnancy when intercourse is beneficial for the development of the fetus. Bathsheba was telling her son Solomon, I did my utmost to ensure that you would have extra strength and beauty. And now you use that strength and appeal to pursue drink? Third, and what, son of my vows? Which is to say, with regard to all of the women of your father's house, remember David did have multiple wives, they would take vows while they were pregnant, saying, let me have a son who is fit to be king, right? David had multiple wives. They were all praying that their son would become king. But I, by contrast, took a vow and said, dear God, let me have a son who is diligent and filled with knowledge of the Torah and fit for prophecy. And her prayer was answered because she prayed for the right thing. It wasn't just power and honor that she wanted. She wanted what would be best for Israel. So she prayed for a son that would be steeped in Torah. And that's what was best for Israel as a king. It is further stated there, Proverbs 31:4. It is not for kings, O Lemuel, it is not for kings to drink wine, nor for princes to say, where is strong drink? So the Gemara provides an explanation of the meaning of each part of this verse. It is not for kings. Bathsheba said to her son Solomon, "What have you to do with kings who drink wine and become intoxicated and say, 'Why, Lama, do we need God?'" Kel. So the Gemara continues to explain the verse. "Nor for princes, Rosenim, to say, 'Where is strong drink?'" And this means that one like Solomon, to whom all the secrets, Razeh, of the world are revealed, should he drink wine and become intoxicated? Solomon's operating at such a high level of wisdom and prophecy. He shouldn't have any. He needs to have every moment of his life available to bring down that wisdom and prophecy for the sake of the Jewish people. He can't get involved in being a drunkard. Alternatively, there are those who say that this part of the verse should be understood as follows. One like Solomon, to whom all the princes of the world rise early to come to his door, should he drink wine and become intoxicated? In other words, the honor of the throne and the throne of Israel is on him. He has to represent. Rabbi Yitzchak says, from where can it be learned that Solomon repented and admitted to his mother that she was justified in her rebukes? As it is written, "For I am more foolish than a man and have not the understanding of a man." Proverbs 30 verse 2. Who wrote Proverbs? King Solomon. This should be understood as follows. "For I am more foolish than a man." Man, Ish. That is, I am more foolish than Noah, who sinned with wine, and he is called a man. As it is written, and Noah began to be a farmer. Ish ha'adama, a man of the soil, a man of the ground. And have not the understanding of a man. Now we're translating as man the word Adam, like Adam, the first man. And this is a reference to Adam, the first man, who also sinned with wine, in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir, who says that the tree of knowledge was a grapevine. That completes our discussion of wine. Now back to the stubborn and rebellious son. The Mishnah teaches that if the son ate and drank the requisite amounts of meat and wine, but he did it with a group who was assembled for the purpose of performing a mitzvah, fulfilling a commandment, then he does not become liable as a stubborn and rebellious son. Rabbi Abahu says he is not liable unless he eats with a group that is entirely made up of idlers, people who fulfill no purpose in this world. They're just sitting around, talking, drinking, not using their potential in any way, not bearing fruit in this world. As you've heard me say before, what's the first commandment that God gave all of us? Peru uruvu, be fruitful and multiply. If it only meant reproduce, it would have been enough to say multiply. What does it mean to be fruitful? It means to bear fruit in this world, right? In other words, to do that for which your soul was sent into this world. Figure out, keep asking, what is my mission? What is my purpose in this world? The more you ask, the closer you'll get to knowing it and then doing it, right? Idlers are people who just reject that whole idea. They're like, whatever, I can get away with not working, welfare check comes. Well, why do I need to do anything? Those are idlers. This seems to indicate that if he eats and drinks in the company of decent people, even if he consumes the required amounts that would otherwise make him liable, he does not become a stubborn and rebellious son. The Gemara asks, but didn't we learn in the Mishnah, if the son ate and drank the requisite amounts of meat and wine with a group that was assembled for the performance of a mitzvah, he does not become liable as a stubborn and rebellious son. So a precise reading of this Mishnah indicates that the reason that he does not become liable is that he ate and drank with a group assembled for the performance of a mitzvah. But if they were not assembled for the performance of a mitzvah, he would be liable even if that group is not entirely made up of idlers. It could be regular people, but they're not doing a mitzvah at that time. That doesn't make them idlers, but it sounds like he would not, then he would qualify. So which is it? Is it just that he has to be surrounded by pure idlers, or just people who are not engaged in a mitzvah? The Gemara answers, there is no contradiction between the Mishnah and the statement of Rabbi Abahu. In fact, the son is liable only if he eats with a group of whom all of them are idlers. And what the Mishnah is teaching us is this, that even if the group is entirely composed of idlers, if they are occupied with a mitzvah, then there is no concern that he will be drawn down the pathways of sin and become liable as a stubborn and rebellious son. Now the Mishnah teaches that if the son ate and drank the requisite amount, and which is to tell you, right, that even idlers, even worthless people, if you can inspire them to do something of value, there's hope for them. They can be redeemed, and you can be in their company. The Mishnah teaches that if the son ate and drank the requisite amounts of meat and wine at a meal celebrating the intercalation of the month, now, right, when the Sanhedrin was meeting in the temple, at the times of the Holy Temple, and would declare whether we're going to add a day to the month or not, right? They're declaring what is going to be the date of the new month based on witnesses bringing testimony about whether they saw the new moon or not, right? They declared when the month began, and there would be a celebration around the intercalation of the month. So if it was at that kind of a meal, in other words, a mitzvah meal, and this is a particular mitzvah, well then, even if he ate that much meat and wine, he would not qualify as a stubborn and rebellious son. So the Gemara asks, is this to say that meat and wine are brought up to the upper chamber where the month is intercalated? But isn't it taught in the Baraisa, they assent to intercalate the month only with a meal consisting of bread made of grain and legumes? The Gemara answers, the Mishnah teaches us this, even though they ordinarily assent to the upper chamber only with bread and legumes, and he brought up meat and wine and ate them, since they are occupied with a mitzvah around him, there is no concern that he will be drawn to sin, and he would not qualify as a stubborn and rebellious son. The sages taught in a Baraisa, no fewer than 10 men ascend to the upper chamber for the intercalation of the month. And they ascend to intercalate the month only with bread made of grain and legumes. And they ascend only on the night of the month's intercalation. And they ascend not by day, but only at night. And the Gemara asks, but isn't it taught in another Baraisa, they ascend not at night, but only by day? And the Gemara explains, as Rabbi Chiya bar Abba said to his sons, when you come to intercalate the month, ascend early and leave early, so that people should hear you coming and going, and thereby know that you have been addressing this matter. The proper time for this is at daybreak, between night and day. The Mishnah teaches that our Mishnah about qualifying to be the stubborn or rebellious son. If he ate that meat and wine, that extreme amount of meat and wine, but he did it in the context of eating second tithe in Jerusalem, meaning, right, he left the farm with this food, or he brought money from the farm and went to Jerusalem during one of the festivals, Passover, Shavuos, or Sukkot, right? And he brought that money, which is second tithe money, for the purpose of eating and drinking in Jerusalem. Then no matter how crazy he goes in Jerusalem, the whole trip is a mitzvah, right? He's on the pilgrimage, a pilgrimage festival, and no matter what he eats and drinks there, he's not going to qualify for stubborn and rebellious son. And the Gemara explains, since he eats the second tithe in the normal way, i.e. he is commanded in Jerusalem, therefore he will not be drawn to sin. And the Mishnah teaches that if he ate the meat of unslaughtered animal carcasses or trephos, or repugnant creatures or creeping animals, he is not liable as a stubborn and rebellious son. Now, this is the opposite concept. So if, even though he ate this extreme amount of gluttony, right, and drunkenness of meat and wine, but he was somehow involved in something righteous, right, surrounded by people who are doing a mitzvah in that context, so then he doesn't qualify for becoming the stubborn and rebellious son. Okay, but if he eats this amount of meat and wine, which is considered wicked, in a context of greater wickedness, actually transgressing a specific law in the Torah, then also he doesn't qualify as the stubborn or rebellious son. Why? Rava says, if the boy ate the meat of fowl, meaning, right, fowl, chicken, even if he ate the required amount, he does not become a stubborn and rebellious son. So the Gemara raises a difficulty. We'll get to the why in a moment. The Gemara raises a difficulty. But didn't we learn in the Mishnah that if the boy ate the meat of trephos, of nevela, unslaughtered animal carcasses, therefore not kosher, or trephos, not kosher, or repugnant creatures or creeping animals, he does not become a stubborn and rebellious son. A precise reading of this indicates that it is only if he ate the meat of such animals that he is not liable. But if he ate the meat of kosher animals, which includes the meat of fowl, he would become a stubborn and rebellious son, counter to the ruling of Rava, and the Gemara resolves this When we learned this in the Mishnah as well, it was in reference to completing the measure of meat. Rava was speaking of the primary consumption of meat. Maybe, he's got to eat like a half mana or a mana, depending on who you follow. And if he ate like almost that much meat and then just a little bit of chicken to put him over the top, okay. But, 90%, 95, 99% of it has to be meat, red meat, and from a kosher animal. So the Mishnah teaches that if he ate an item that involves performing a mitzvah or an item that involves committing a transgression, he does not become a stubborn and rebellious son. Now the Gemara explains. The ruling concerning an item that involves performing a mitzvah includes mitzvahs by rabbinic law, such as comforting mourners. And the ruling concerning an item that involves committing a transgression includes transgressing prohibitions by rabbinic law, such as eating on a communal fast, right? Not a fast day mandated by the Torah, but a fast day decreed by the sages, for example, because there's a drought. And so they say, okay, we're all going to starve to death if the rain doesn't come, so we're going to observe a fast day in the whole community. And if somebody violates that fast, he would be violating not a Torah prohibition, but a rabbinic prohibition. Now the Gemara asks, and what is the reason that eating an item involving a mitzvah or a transgression does not render him a stubborn and rebellious son? So the Gemara answers, the verse states, this son of ours is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey our voices. Deuteronomy 21:20, which indicates that the law applies to a boy who does not obey our voices, i.e. the voice of his parents, but not to one who also does not obey the voice of God. Right? So fascinating. We get this, right? If he's somehow involved in a mitzvah, okay, well then he is heeding our voices. Maybe he's wicked in many ways and he's a glutton and a drunkard, but he's involved in some kind of a mitzvah. So to some extent, he heeds our voices. But if he doesn't listen to his parents at all, and he never does any kind of a mitzvah, and he's a glutton and a drunkard, but he also disobeys God, then, for this reason, he also falls outside the definition. Because he doesn't obey our voices, and he doesn't obey God. Now, you can imagine that this wicked child, who is, doesn't listen to his parents at all, and is also involved in drunkenness and gluttony, probably he's not, following God's laws either. And so therefore, there never will be, by legal definition, a stubborn and rebellious son who's executed for that. The Mishnah teaches, and I'm almost done. Questions or comments, please get them in now. The Mishnah teaches that if the rebellious boy ate any other food, but he did not eat meat, or he drank any beverage, but he did not drink wine, he is not liable as a stubborn and rebellious son. And the Gemara clarifies, that which the Mishnah teaches, the statement, if he ate any other food, but he did not eat meat, comes to include pressed figs from the town of Keilah, the eating of which is as satisfying as eating meat, but for which one is not liable. So, right, even if he was eating Impossible burgers that taste just like meat, but they're not meat, he wouldn't qualify. And that which the Mishnah teaches, the statement, if he drank any beverage but did not drink wine, comes to include honey and milk, which, though they have a slightly intoxicating effect, do not render him liable as a stubborn and rebellious son. And from where is it learned that honey and milk have an intoxicating effect? As it is taught in a baraisa, if a priest ate pressed figs from Keilah, or he drank honey or milk, thereby becoming intoxicated, and he then entered the temple to perform the temple service, he is liable for entering the temple while intoxicated. A Kohen, if he had any kind of intoxication, if he drank any wine, could not enter the temple and bring offerings on behalf of the Jewish people. That is specifically prohibited in the Torah. And now at the top of 71a, the Mishnah teaches that the boy does not become a stubborn and rebellious son unless he actually eats meat and drinks wine. And the sages taught in a baraisa, if he ate any other food but did not eat meat, or if he drank any other beverage but did not drink wine, he does not become a stubborn and rebellious son unless he actually eats meat and drinks wine. As it is stated, this son of ours is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey our voices. He is a glutton and a drunkard. And although there is no explicit proof to the matter, there is an allusion to the matter in another verse, as it is stated, be not among wine drinkers, among gluttonous eaters of meat. Proverbs 23. And the verse states, for the drunkard and the glutton shall come to poverty, and drowsiness shall clothe a man with rags. That is to say, a person who is a glutton and a drunkard and sleeps a lot due to his excessive eating and drinking will end up poor and dressed in rags. And Rabbi Zera expounds the same verse and says, with regard to anyone who sleeps in the study hall, his Torah shall become tattered, as it is stated, and drowsiness shall clothe a man with rags. And there we will conclude, and God willing, resume tomorrow at the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific. I'll take just a few questions. Bill. Tangentially related, the Achaemenid Empire in Persia, that'd be Cyrus and his descendants, had a policy where new projects would be discussed twice. Ideas proposed while drunk had to be discussed again while sober. Great plan. And ideas proposed while sober had to be discussed again while drunk. Fascinating. The theory being, if it made sense both to the sober and the drunk, then clearly it must be a good idea. Very interesting. Sharon says, Noah actually cursed his grandson Canaan, not Ham, the father of Canaan. Exactly, that's what they said. And I have taught this strange tale in my Strange Tales from the Torah curriculum. The predominant teachings that I came across is that the cursing of Canaan is an origin tale to explain why the Canaanites became such a dominant enemy of the Israelites down the road. Very interesting. Thank you. Bill, regarding the fruit in the Garden of Eden. So the apple thing is actually much easier to explain than it looks like. It's a pun. The name for apple in Latin is malus. The name of evil is malus. I'm sure I'm butchering the pronunciations. That's it. That's the whole reason that Renaissance art uses apples. Fascinating. And Bill spelled that malus for apple with 2 L's. M-A-L-L-U-S, and for evil with 1 L, M-A-L-U-S. And that's why the apple shows up in Renaissance art. Thank you. That's amazing. And Sharon, how could Bathsheba be quoting Proverbs? Were those not attributed to the writing of Solomon? Oh, we see that all the time, that they will go anachronistically and say that somebody is quoting something that was written much later in time in the Bible. And it's funny, I just heard a story today about Rav Zusha of Anipol, who was known as a great chassid, a great man of God, a man of tremendous faith, but not among the other chassidim, like the most learned, not such a big, guy who had the whole Talmud memorized type of guy, but tremendous, incredible Holy Spirit in him. And then so he was once at a meal and they were talking about some matter of law. And he pipes in and he says, in the Yerushalmi, it says such and such. And they're all like, Zusha, wow. Most of the sages and even the learned Hasidim, they would know the Bavli very well. That's what we're studying, the Talmud Bavli. The Talmud that was, written and completed in Bavel. The parallel project was in the Holy Land, and that's known as the Talmud Yerushalmi, which was never completed. That's why we study the Bavli. And that it was never completed because of the persecution of the Romans. And there are many teachings that are similar, but some that are different. And so it takes a real master of learning to know the Yerushalmi. So they said to Zusha, like, how did you know that? It's amazing. You have the whole Yerushalmi memorized. And he said, no, I don't know the Yerushalmi. But I know the sages as they're written and expressed in the Yerushalmi. And I know that they would not hold by this, they would say different. Right? It's not that he had the whole thing memorized, it's that he knows what the mind of the Yerushalmi is. Right? And then another said, it's better for what I'm trying to say right now. What he said was, no, because I got it from the same source as the sages of the Yerushalmi. Right? In other words, the way he figured it out is the same way that the Yerushalmi folks figured it out. it's not that he was a prophet, but he had a tremendous Holy Spirit. Right? And the same idea, when we see in the Talmud that characters in the Bible would be quoting verses that occurred much later in history than when they lived, right? It's because they're all, people in the Bible who are prophets, etc., have access to these higher worlds that we don't have access to. It's the same source of teachings, right? That's what's going on. But I like your question. And finally, Yosef, if these laws are no longer enforced, how are we to keep this law and principle so as to uphold the eternality of the Torah, as Rambam would say? I mean, it's a great question, right? It's not just that they're no longer enforced. It's that this law of the stubborn and rebellious son was never enforced. I don't think there was ever in history of the Jewish people a parents who brought their son, 12-year-old son, to the judges and said, he's stubborn and rebellious, he's destined for nothing but wickedness, please condemn him and let's stone him to death. Never happened. So now, your question is a great question. Why would the Torah include such a law? And it's for us to learn about it and to examine what is the extreme case of a kid who is destined for wickedness. Well, here's the extreme case. Every parent, no matter how troubled and no matter how, much of a troublemaker and even a downright wicked child, his child might be not as wicked as the Ben Sorer Umore, right? And that should give parents hope. So perhaps that's why the kid has hope. He is not destined for a terrible life. We can redeem him. We can educate him. We can be like Solomon's mother and get him back on track. And just as she was able to do it and he turned out to be one of the greatest kings in history, we can get our kid back on track. Might not be easy. Might be a lot of difficulty and stress, but we could do it. We must never lose hope in our children. I have no source for that. That's my interpretation. That's what I've got for us tonight. And with God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow, Sunday, at the regular Sunday time, 6 p.m. Pacific. Have a good night. Shavua Tov. Good vach.